When picking up my drunk brother, I accidentally heard him ask his best friend Noelle, "Why haven't you brought out that little girlfriend you've been hiding?" My heart tightened. We'd been in a secret relationship for 2 years, and I hadn't told my brother yet. The next second, Noelle's tipsy voice floated over. "Is there a need? It's just for fun. Not serious." I went icy cold and raised my hand to knock on the door. "Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day." Now the story begins. Everyone turned to look at me. "What are you doing here?" My brother Mike stubbed out his cigarette, patting the seat beside him for me to sit. "Uncle Driver took leave, so Mom and Dad sent me to pick you up." Mike nodded and said to everyone in the booth, "Put out your cigarettes. My sister can't stand the smell." His friends teased, "Wow, you care so much about your sister. What will you do if she finds a boyfriend?" Mike cursed with a laugh. "Messing up my hair. Don't even think about it. Our Miranda is clean and well-behaved." "Nothing like you dirty lot." A unfamiliar man spoke up. "What kind of talk is that? Isn't there anyone among us you'd approve of?" Mike scanned the room and stopped at the silent Noelle. "Joking. If I had to choose, only Noelle would nearly pass. At least I could take advantage and call him brother-in-law. But from what he said earlier, better not let him harm our girl." His tone was playful. "Just kidding." Noelle's expression turned awkward. He glanced at me, quickly looked away, and said, "Stop talking nonsense. I see Miranda as a sister." "What sister?" I stared at his tense, annoying profile, my eyes stinging with tears. "Miranda." Mike's voice snapped me back to reality. "Why are you staring at your Noelle?" I quickly looked away, biting my trembling lip. Everyone teased, "Don't be fooled by your Noelle's looks. He's no good man." "Yeah, sister." When Noelle lost a game just now, we asked what he likes in a girlfriend. He said young and easy to control, good-tempered and no trouble. "What kind of reason is that?" "Ha ha ha." We used to think he was really into her, but guess what? He said he felt sorry for her because she liked him too humbly. Sigh. He refuses to bring her out to meet us. There are 2 possibilities. Either he's too possessive or he thinks it's unnecessary since they'll break up anyway. He just admitted. "Enough." Noelle interrupted sharply. He slammed his wine glass on the table, making everyone fall silent. The atmosphere turned awkward. Mike, closest to him, frowned. "What's wrong?" "Just because I mentioned Lillian is coming back. You're this angry." My heart skipped a beat. Lillian was coming back. Noelle lit another cigarette irritably, took a few puffs, then glanced at me and dropped it into the ice bucket. "Why bring her up?" Mike smiled like someone who understood. "Stop pretending. If you didn't care about that hidden girlfriend, you'd still be hung up on Lillian." Everyone knew he had a hidden girlfriend. No one knew it was me. At gatherings, he'd answer her calls, patiently report his whereabouts, no matter how busy he was. He sent her flowers and gifts every week. Even Mike had complained to me. "Noelle seems really serious about some girl." I kept a calm face, but my heart was sweet as honey. For 2 years, he'd been thoughtful and romantic. Flawless. The only flaw, he wanted to hide our relationship. He said Mike would go ballistic if he found out his best friend was dating his sister. I believed it, until I heard those words with my own ears. Just for fun. No need to bring her out. I was panic. Eyes so hurt tears threatened to fall. I made an excuse to go to the bathroom and left. The moment the door closed, tears spilled. Thankfully, the bar was noisy enough to drown out my sobs. My phone pinged. Noelle's message. "I'll wait for you outside." It had been 10 minutes since I arrived full of joy. Now I felt like I'd been dragged into icy water, shivering uncontrollably. How could I accept that the man I thought loved me back had never been serious? Being with me was just pity. His heart had always belonged to someone else. My heart ached densely. After a long while, I wiped my tears with a tissue and went out. Noelle was leaning not far away, waiting, looking at him. Tears almost spilled again. We hadn't seen each other for a month. He'd been on a business trip abroad, returning today. We'd planned to meet tomorrow, but I couldn't wait and came here. He approached slowly, staring at my red eyes, and finally said, "Sorry." "Sorry" was a magical phrase. It melted small conflicts when a boyfriend made a mistake. But now it was nothing in the face of a fundamental betrayal. No explanation. Just a death sentence for our love. "Noelle, don't you want to explain what you said earlier?" He avoided my gaze. Why are you so sensitive? It was just banter among friends. I think I've been a decent boyfriend. Was I too sensitive? Maybe. Sensitive people always suffer double the pain. Tears fell again. He reached to wipe them, but I turned away, taking a deep breath. I said, if you like Lillian, why did you start this with me? At the name, his face darkened, voice cold. Didn't you know I liked her? What are you pretending for now? The heated room made me breathless, chest aching as if clenched, head dizzy from the heat. This was the first time we'd mentioned her name in conversation, and his usual gentleness was gone, leaving a stranger who suffocated me. Indeed, Lillian was his weakness. I wanted to curse him, but my throat closed up. A phone call interrupted. An overseas number. My sixth sense told me it was Lillian. His eyes lit up, brushing past me to answer. Lillian, over the music. His gentle voice faded away. My sixth sense was right. It just never told me Noel didn't love me. When I returned to the booth in a daze, Mike and others were talking about Noel. He usually doesn't get angry at jokes. Why lose his temper today? Could it really be because of Lillian? Mike took a sip of wine. What else? He's called Lillian's name every time he gets drunk for years. When she went abroad, he secretly visited her, then came back depressed. He wouldn't tell me why. Later he started dating, and I thought he was moving on when he seemed serious about that girlfriend. But did you see his look when he heard Lillian's coming back? I called him several times before he noticed. I'd never seen Noel drunk, never heard him call another's name, never knew he'd gone abroad for her. They continued, talking about the love letter he never gave on her 18th birthday, buying all her debut albums, so many things I didn't know. I listened to them praise his love, how admirable it was. I kept my face steady, but my nails dug into my palms. Even the playboy young master clicked his tongue. His girlfriend is poor, wasting 2 years. I pretended to rub my eyes, wiping away tears, after their sighs. Mike turned to me, serious now. So, Miranda, don't trust men. Noel was such a good person. Even my brother was fooled. He lured me into his beautiful lie, then broke it with a, sorry. I nodded, voice tiny, I won't trust anymore. Noel never returned to the booth. Mike called him worriedly, then cursed. That bastard. After answering Lillian's call about coming back, he went to prepare a welcome dinner. Is he crazy at midnight? Everyone laughed except me. Maybe because of me. The gathering ended early. Mike was drunk, and I struggled to stuff him into the convertible's passenger seat. He babbled about childhood. You were so tiny. Now you're old enough to drive and pick up your brother. I'd just gotten my license. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, when I didn't respond, he rambled on. Why so quiet? You've always been a mute. Same age and background as Lillian, but such different personalities. At the name, my fingers tensed on the wheel. Miranda, you're my sister. You can be willful, coquettish, do whatever you want. Out of the corner of my eye, Mike seemed to fall asleep after saying this. Memories rushed back to childhood. I'd always been quiet, never willful or coquettish. They said Mike was a sistercon, but our relationship wasn't always this close. No wonder. Who would favor a dull girl when there was Lillian? Bright and lovely. Mike was. Noel was too. They took Lillian to arcades, caught fireflies, climbed trees for fruit, never asking if I wanted to join. Lillian would be coquettish. Let the boys play house with her. She was the princess. They were princes and knights. What was I? Miranda. There's only one princess. You can be her maid, she said. I was always the unnoticed role. But Noel saw me. At 10, Lillian obsessed over dramas, forcing brothers to write wish bottles to dig up later. They helped her buy paper, hold shovels, while I stood behind, silent. I wanted to write a wish bottle too. No one asked. They pinched Lillian's face, calling her naive, but kept filling the hole. Even Mike thought I stood back because I wasn't interested. I was just afraid to get close and still be ignored. Noel noticed. He squatted, looking up at my red eyes, sensing my embarrassment. He called, Miranda, do you want to write one too? Girls like these things. Right. I can dig a hole for you. Lillian naturally earned everyone's affection, taking it for granted. But I was different. I'd never forget Noel's tentative gaze when he extended the olive branch. In those long young years, occasional kindness accumulated into a girl's unspoken love. He was right. I knew he liked Lillian once. The cello solos he loved were from her 18th concert. The dish he practiced so hard was her favorite. In old memories, his gaze followed her. I watched from behind, but he was too good. Childhood Noel offering kindness. Adult Noel full of charm. I couldn't help but like him. When Lillian went abroad, he was depressed. Mike often brought him over to eat and game. I made excuses to enter Mike's room, sending fruits, ask math questions. Growing closer to Noel, I grew greedy, praying he'd fall for me over time. My prayers worked. His gaze turned gentle. 2 years ago, he blushed and asked, "Miranda, want to give this a try?" Suddenly, his gentle past self overlapped with the present. "Didn't you know I liked her? What are you pretending for now?" Vision blurred. I wiped my eyes with my hand. But when I could see again, it was too late. I rear-ended the car in front. Now Mike bosses me around. Peel grapes for me. And a cup of tea. I obey. Full of guilt. In the car accident, I only got minor scrapes. He broke his forearm, gritting his teeth. Road killer. You're Noel's disciple. Noel had a car accident once, shortly after Lillian went abroad. He crashed into a tree, hospitalized for 2 months. Remembering Mike's words yesterday, I asked casually, why did he have that car accident back then? Mike waved his hand, but it was his stiff arm in a cast that he raised, looking a bit comical. Forget it. It was all because of Lillian. He secretly went abroad to see her, and when he came back, he was like a lost soul. Look at his pathetic look. I haven't seen him around recently. I don't know what he's been up to. He didn't even send his regards when he knew I had a car accident. So Noel knew about it. Yet he didn't even send a message of concern. After that night, our chat history with Noel stopped at the message, "Waiting for you outside." It seemed I wasn't even worthy of his concern. Seeing me with my head down and not speaking, Mike looked boredly at the hydrangeas on the tea table. "Huh, aren't these your most precious flowers? Why haven't you put them in a vase yet?" Although Noel hadn't contacted me, the flowers still arrived at home on time every week. I got up and threw them all into the trash can. Mike was a bit puzzled. Why throw them away when they're in full bloom? Actually, these weren't the varieties of flowers I liked. It was just because they were sent by Noel. So I was willing to trim them, water them, and take good care of them. But no matter how carefully one takes care of a flower that has been plucked from its roots, it will always wither in a short period of time. I smiled and said to him, since they're destined to wither, no matter how much I like them, I can't keep them. It's the same whether I throw them away sooner or later. Mike was indeed my own brother. He noticed that I hadn't been in a good mood recently and said he would take me out to have fun. When we got there, I realized it was Lillian's welcome back banquet. We grew up together. She was cute and pretty, with a soft and sweet voice, and had always been the darling of everyone. Sure enough, Mike insisted on attending even with his arm in a cast. The Matthew family was indeed a top wealthy family. The banquet was extremely grand. There were lily-of-the-valley flowers that had been freshly airlifted from abroad everywhere. It was obvious that a huge amount of money had been spent on them. As soon as Mike arrived, he was pulled away by his friends to play cards. I sat alone in the corner, and my eyes uncontrollably searched for Noel's figure. A figure in a white dress appeared in my sight. It was Lillian. After not seeing her for 3 years, she had become even more beautiful. She had shed her former green and childish look and was now graceful and generous. Every frown and smile was that of a wealthy young lady. She saw me and greeted me excitedly. "Miranda, long time no see." I had a complicated feeling. Actually, I didn't hate Lillian, since we were the only 2 girls among the wealthy families around us when we were young and were also the youngest. She was quite nice to me, but she was so likable that all the adults praised her for being smart and cute. And the older brothers all preferred to play with her, making me look like an unremarkable ugly duckling. What's more, Noel liked her. I couldn't tell what kind of mood I was in, but it wasn't good. The thorn buried in my heart seemed to ache again. After a little small talk, perhaps because we hadn't seen each other for a long time, or perhaps because I wasn't good at chatting, we fell into an awkward silence. I looked around, searching for a topic. The lily of the valley is very beautiful. She casually picked one and said casually, "Brother Noel got these from Finland." I don't know where he heard that I like lily of the valley. They're rare in China. I didn't expect him to be able to get so many. This was also my favorite flower. Its blooming period was short. The branches were soft and delicate, and it was very precious and fragile. More than half of them would be damaged during transportation, but Noel was able to get so many. He must have put a lot of effort into it. He had never given me Lily of the Valley. It was also my fault. I never took the initiative to say what I liked. I suddenly remembered that once I went to his company to find him, and his assistant smiled and asked me what kind of flowers I liked. At that time, I was immersed in the false happiness and couldn't hear the underlying meaning. I said that I liked any flowers he gave me. Now that I thought about it, the flowers must have been chosen by the assistant. Most of them were blue, and that assistant liked to wear a blue suit the most. The flowers were still being sent now. Maybe he forgot to tell the assistant to stop. I realized later that he wasn't even willing to spend such a little thought on me. But he was willing to take the initiative to find out her preferences and go to great lengths just to please her. I was so stupid that every time I sent him a message saying that the flowers were beautiful and I liked them, he would say, "Whatever you like, I will offer it to you with both hands." In fact, he didn't even know the color of the flowers. People can lie, but details can't. Love is in the details, and so is the lack of love. At the door, Noel, who was late, was wearing a slightly wrinkled suit. He had always been a clean freak. I didn't know why there was still dirt on the sole of his shoe, which was so out of place with him. After scanning the room, his eyes fixed on Lillian. He didn't see me. It wasn't until he walked to a distance of only 5 meters from us that he finally noticed me, and his steps paused. "Brother Noel, you're here." Noel was indeed a junior that even Matthew's strict grandfather praised as having great prospects. Having been in the business world for a long time, he was very good at controlling his emotions. He immediately put away his awkward expression and came up with a smile to greet us. Only then did I see the gift box in his hand. He avoided my gaze and handed the gift box to Lillian. "I searched for this for a long time, so I'm late." Lillian had stayed abroad for a few years. As soon as she received the gift, she opened it immediately and let out a cry of surprise. "Oh. It's the wish bottle we buried when we were children. I actually said that I wanted to become the happiest little princess in the world at that time." How childish. Noelle's eyes stayed affectionately on her face, full of doting. She was a princess originally, loved by everyone. Noel was no exception. Not only did he put a lot of effort into preparing the flowers, but he also dug out the wish bottle that had been buried in the ground more than 10 years ago with his own hands. But he forgot that today was the 2nd anniversary of our relationship. To be exact, we hadn't broken up yet. Lillian had 2 deep dimples on her lips and smiled happily. "This is my favorite among all the gifts you've given me." When Noel heard this, he looked at me warily. I was stabbed by this look, and my blood seemed to freeze. I asked knowingly, "Does Brother Noel often give you gifts?" "Yes. Although we haven't seen each other in the past 3 years abroad, I can receive his gifts almost every month. Last month it was a necklace, and the month before last it was a cello. So it wasn't just me who received gifts. It was just that Lillian's gifts were according to her interests and preferences. As for mine, last month it was a pair of earrings, but I didn't have pierced ears. The month before last it was a piano, but I had no musical talent at all. Maybe it was just random. Just by the way, but I was so stupid that I specially got my ears pierced and took piano lessons. Looking at everything in front of me, I somehow found the courage and said half-mockingly, "Brother Noel is so good to his sister. Does your girlfriend know about it?" Noel's face showed some embarrassment. Lillian was attracted by the tall and straight figure in the distance. "My uncle is back. I'll go over there first." After she left, Noel pulled me to the deserted back garden. It was winter, and I was wearing a thin knitted sweater. I shivered from the cold. If it were in the past, he would immediately take off his coat and put it on my shoulders, and then gently hold me in his arms. But he didn't. He frowned, his mind full of the provocative words I had just said. "Miranda, what are you fooling around for?" The cold wind made my eyes feel a bit swollen. I closed my eyes and held back the sourness, and asked softly, "Do you remember what day it is today?" He was taken aback, obviously not remembering. I continued, "It's the 2nd anniversary of our relationship. Noel, you promised me before that when it came to the 2nd anniversary, we would announce our relationship to everyone." He looked at me with a complicated expression, his lips moving hesitantly. "Sorry, I've been busy preparing the welcome back banquet for Lillian recently. The wealthy and busy often forget things. But what they forget are just things that are unimportant to them. Welcoming her back was more important than our anniversary. How ridiculous. Are you that busy? Too busy to spare a moment to seriously mention breaking up to me. Actually, my mood had calmed down a lot these days. If he had seriously apologized to me and we had broken up peacefully, I really planned to let it go. If I told my brother, he would definitely rush up and beat him up. But for the sake of our childhood friendship, I didn't want to be too harsh. Perhaps he thought my rhetorical question was a bit aggressive, and his face looked very pale. He frowned and said, "You used to be the most gentle and obedient. Why do you speak so harshly now? I haven't said I want to break up, have I?" My chest suddenly ached. It was that damn gentle and obedient again. So he chose me as a consolation when he was lonely. My voice trembled in the wind. Then this girlfriend who can't be shown in the light and is just for fun, will break up for you. He let out a sigh of relief, as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't say anything for a long time. But I knew it definitely wasn't a plea for me to stay. He might be glad that he didn't have to be the bad guy. I held back the pain and continued. Also, who do you think you are to pity me? It makes me feel ridiculous. You don't have to send flowers anymore. I really hate the flowers you sent. A trace of confusion flashed in his eyes, and he quickly looked away. Sure enough, he didn't send the flowers. The cold wind blew my thoughts to pieces. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. I stared blankly at the man in front of me who didn't know what to say. The phone rang inopportune. Just by looking at Noel's expression, I knew who was calling. He instantly threw the matter of sending flowers out of his mind. His brows relaxed, and even his tone softened a lot. "What's wrong? Are Mike and the others looking for me? I'll come right away." After hanging up the phone, he was in a much better mood. He cleared his throat and said, "Miranda, we'll talk about our matter later." He left in a hurry, looking at the freshly turned soil in the garden. I felt a bit emotional. 12 years ago, he buried a wish bottle for me with his own hands here, and just now, he dug it out for Lillian with his own hands. He was clearly a person who even changed the bed sheets every day. Yet he didn't hesitate to get dirt and dust on himself. But what about the wish bottle I buried on the side? Did he still remember it? It seemed I was stupid. His love and tenderness made me think foolishly that my secret love had come true. It turned out that the dim supporting role wouldn't shine, and it couldn't make him like me either. He just enjoyed the way I adored him humbly when he was sad about his broken heart. It was either pity for me or empathy with me. Anyway, it couldn't be called love. I slowly squatted on the ground and burst into tears. The villa was brightly lit, but the lights in the garden suddenly went out. No one could hear my cries mixed in the cold wind. Just like when I was a child. They couldn't see me running to catch up with them. I didn't know how long I cried. And in the end, my voice was a bit hoarse, until I suddenly heard Lillian's voice coming from a distance. "Uncle, I'm almost out of my pocket money. Come and play a few hands for me." I looked in the direction of the voice and saw a tall and slender man on the balcony on the second floor. From that position, one could overlook everything that happened in the garden. Against the light, I couldn't see his expression clearly. I didn't know when he had been standing there, and I didn't know if he had heard this conversation. "Uncle, what are you doing standing here?" Lillian pushed open the balcony door and called him. I wiped my face casually and was just about to find a place to hide when the man's voice came. "Don't come out. It's cold outside. I'll go over now." He turned around and pushed Lillian, who had stuck her head out, back in. Mike's call also came in just then. "Where are you? Come up after eating something and say hello to your uncle." Outside the poker room, there was a large crowd. The man with a tough outline sat at the poker table, wearing a dark suit, noble and casual. He raised his hand, and the people who had gathered at the door to flatter him were quickly sent away. Mike sat opposite him and pulled me to greet him. I said in a low voice, "Hello, Uncle." Matthew raised his eyes and looked at me with a somewhat inquiring gaze. Not answering, I guessed he didn't remember such an unimportant person like me. I had always been a bit afraid of him and shrank my neck and hid behind Mike. Fortunately, he didn't mention that he had seen me in the back garden just now. He probably didn't hear my conversation with Noel. This made me feel a bit more at ease. Mike was bad at playing cards, and he had very few chips left. Matthew was the same. Lillian had lost all her chips just now. It was Noel who had a mountain of chips in front of him. Mike was annoyed by his bad playing. Excusing that his arm hurt, he pressed me onto the chair. I can't do it anymore. Miranda, you come and take my place. I was pulled to sit opposite Matthew and looked at him at the same level. He had extremely beautiful eyes, deep and cold, and his dark eyes were bottomless. After a few rounds, almost all the chips were back in front of Matthew. Lillian was very happy and clamored to end the game and invite everyone to have a late-night snack. But no one dared to move. With Matthew present, the people at the table didn't joke around as they usually did. They were all quiet and well-behaved. In terms of seniority, he was Lillian's uncle and the successor designated by Matthew's grandfather. He had been pampered since he was a child. When Mike, who was 10 years old, was playing with mud with me, who was 5 years old, Matthew was sitting in front of the windowsill reading financial newspapers. At that time, he was 13 years old. Obviously, he wasn't much older than us, but he carried the future and hopes of the family, and he always looked mature and steady. This led to all the children being afraid of him and respectfully calling him uncle. If he didn't say to stop, no one dared to stand up. I stretched. I had strained my back in the last car accident, and it started to ache after sitting for a long time. Matthew glanced at me without showing any obvious emotion and said softly, "Let's call it a day." Upon hearing this, Noel immediately showed his cards and responded to Lillian attentively. "Are you hungry? What would you like to eat?" Mike chimed in teasingly. "Wow, you care so much about Lillian. Why don't you ask us what we want to eat?" Lillian's face suddenly turned red. She met Noel's gaze, and he smiled ambiguously. This was a treatment I had never received. He was so cautious. During our 2-year relationship, in front of our elders and my brother, he didn't even dare to give me a look, not to mention showing his affection so blatantly like this. The sadness welled up again and I couldn't hold it back. I lowered my head and stared at the poker table, afraid that others would see my embarrassed expression. Suddenly, a hand with distinct knuckles stretched out in front of me. Matthew pushed all the chips in front of me. I looked up at him in surprise and met his gaze, only to hear his clear and deep voice. "Pocket money. Consider it a greeting gift. Long time no see, Miranda." He had ignored me when I greeted him earlier, but now he took the initiative to greet me out of the blue, and he gave me all the chips, which were estimated to be in the low 7-figure range. Everyone present was very shrewd, and countless eyes flickered back and forth between the two of us. My cheeks burned, but Matthew acted as if nothing had happened and looked at me with a smile. It was Lillian. She pretended to be angry. "Didn't Uncle win those for me? You ignored me when I asked you to buy me a car. Why are you so generous to Miranda?" Matthew leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes slightly, and said casually, "Just go and choose one. Put it in my name." She cheered and shook Noel's hand with a smile, asking him to accompany her to look at cars tomorrow. But Noel didn't move. His hand hung down by his side. He stared at me intently, and there were some strange emotions rolling in his pupils. This was the first time in front of others that he had lost his usual calmness. Uncle and Miranda seemed to be quite familiar. "Ah, Uncle still treats her like a child." Mike spoke up to save me from the awkward situation. In fact, I wasn't familiar with Matthew since I was a child, apart from the daily interactions between our two families and matters related to Lillian. There wasn't much other communication between us. I thanked him dryly. "Thank you, Uncle." Matthew didn't respond. He casually draped the suit jacket he had taken off over his arm and got up to walk out. Everyone immediately followed him. At the end of the crowd, Noel suddenly grabbed my wrist and asked in a very low voice with a hint of accusation, "Why are you blushing at Matthew?" I shook off his hand and said coldly, "What does it have to do with you? We've already broken up. What right do you have to question me?" He frowned tightly. "Can't I care as an older brother? I'm reminding you that Matthew is not someone you can afford to mess with." We had been in a relationship for 2 years, holding hands, hugging, and kissing. We had done everything except having sex. Now he was reverting to the identity of an older brother. My own brother Mike was right in front of me. Why did I need his concern? I took a deep breath and tried my best to control my voice. "My own brother hasn't said anything." "What kind of brother are you?" Noel was taken aback, but his expression quickly returned to normal. "Stay away from him. And I hope you don't tell anyone about the two of us." So that's why he stopped me. He was afraid that I would get too close to Matthew and tell him about our secret relationship, which would affect his pursuit of Matthew's niece. I looked at his somewhat evasive eyes, and for the first time in all these years, I felt that I wasn't worthy of what I had given. Relief gradually replaced the sadness. Fortunately, I had only wasted 2 years on him. Don't worry, I won't say anything. After all, I was really a coward. We were in the same social circle, and our parents had close interactions. We would inevitably meet each other. Moreover, my brother regarded him as his closest brother. If I told the truth, it would inevitably damage the harmony between the two families. But before I could finish speaking, his eyes were burning with eagerness, and he interrupted me. I knew you really liked me. If Lillian hadn't returned to the country, I really thought about being with you properly. But she's back. Miranda, I was with you in the first place because of your feelings for me. I love Lillian just as much as you love me. You can understand me, right? His eyes were shining brightly, as if waiting for my affirmative answer. But I couldn't understand. When you love someone, how can you spare the thought to be in a relationship with someone else? Looking at his face, I suddenly didn't even want to give him a single word of accusation. Whatever you say is fine. From now on, we'll go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. I left him behind and trotted to catch up with Mike. Lillian said that she had eaten Western food for 3 years and insisted on going to eat Sichuan cuisine late at night. Mike had to avoid certain foods because of his recent injury, so we went home first. On the way, he suddenly asked me, "Are you very familiar with Uncle?" The way he looked at you was a bit strange. I was taken aback and thought of his tall and straight figure on the balcony again. He saw that scene in the garden. It was like a childish love affair, and he might have found it a bit ridiculous. I shook my head. You know very well that I haven't spoken to him as much as you have. That's true. Stay away from him. Why was everyone so afraid of Matthew? I was just about to ask Mike, but seeing his serious expression, I finally didn't say anything. When I got home, I logged into my social media account and scrolled through it from beginning to end. This was a secondary account I used to record the daily life of our relationship after being with Noel. When I wrote those words, I thought I was the happiest person in the world. But now, looking at them again, I just felt a sense of irony. Today I went to my brother's room to ask for help with my homework. Actually, I could do it all, but I just wanted to see him. He was so gentle and even tucked the stray hair by my ear behind it. I didn't listen to a single word of the knowledge points. He asked me if I wanted to give it a try. Of course I did. I originally thought I would have a secret crush on him for my whole life. But I didn't expect that one day I would really see the light at the end of the tunnel. I called him at night. It was a bit noisy on the other end, and I even heard my brother's voice saying something like, "Why are you answering a woman's call during a brother's gathering?" He cursed with a smile and then said goodnight to me so gently. Help. He sent a lot of flowers, although they weren't the lily of the valley I liked. I want to take good care of them and make them beautiful. I like any flowers he gives me. He said we would make our relationship public on our 2nd anniversary. I originally wanted to make a video to commemorate it. But when I looked through our things, we didn't even have a single photo together. He said he didn't like taking photos. Now that I thought about it, he was probably afraid of leaving evidence of our relationship. After I finished reading, I deactivated the account. It was like a bowl of half-cooked rice. I swallowed it several times, and finally, I was willing to spit it out. The car that I crashed last time hadn't been sent for repair yet, although it didn't affect driving. The paint was scratched quite a bit. I picked a nice day and planned to send it to the 4S store. As soon as I went out, I ran into the servants of the Matthew family loading the withered lily of the valley onto a truck. The truck blocked my way, so I had to wait obediently by the side. In just a few days, their branches had dried up and they were no longer delicate and dewy. I felt a bit sorry for them and was lost in thought for a moment. Just throw them away if they're broken. There's nothing to be sorry about. The voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw Matthew. He was wearing a gray coat today, and underneath was a pure beige cashmere sweater. It was very different from his usual appearance in a suit. Even his stray hair hung casually in front of his forehead. With this outfit, he didn't look like a 30-year-old man at all. I greeted him dryly again. Hello, Uncle. Matthew's gaze lingered on me for a moment and then he said, "Where are you going?" "To the 4S store to repair the car." He lowered his eyes and thought for a moment, and then directly opened the door of the passenger seat and sat in. It's on the way. Give me a ride. I hadn't even said which 4S store I was going to, but thinking of the generous pocket money he had given me, I suppressed my doubts. That amount of money was more than enough to make me a driver for a while. Where are you going, Uncle? Matthew's voice was deep. To choose a car, he answered very casually, as if he had come up with the itinerary on the spot. I didn't dare to question him. I held the steering wheel firmly with both hands, afraid of another accident like last time. After all, the person sitting in the passenger seat this time wasn't Mike. Mike would just boss me around for a couple of days at most. If I accidentally injured the future heir of the Matthew family, my whole family would have to go to their house to apologize. We arrived at the 4S store safely, and I let out a long sigh of relief. Matthew followed behind me, giving the impression that he was walking with me. When the person in charge of the 4S store saw him, he quickly greeted him. Hello, Mr. Matthew. Your niece, Miss 1, has already arrived and is inside. It seemed that Matthew really was going the same way, following the guidance of the person in charge. I saw Lillian test driving a car through the glass window. Standing beside her was Noel. There was a smile on his face, and he reached through the lowered car window to fasten her seatbelt for her. It was just a test drive. Was it really necessary? I couldn't stand it anymore. I threw the car keys to the person in charge and said to Matthew, Uncle, you can go in. I'll leave now. But Matthew moved to the side and blocked my way. Let's go in and take a look together. Before I could refuse, he strode past me and walked inside. I had to follow in his footsteps. Lillian's voice came. I don't really like this interior. You can choose the options. Replace the seats, the roof, and the wheels with the ones you like. Noel patiently introduced it to her, being even more attentive than the salesperson standing aside. Why is Uncle here? Lillian stuck her head out of the car. After greeting Matthew, her eyes turned to me with a look of confusion. Miranda, why are you here too? I smiled and said, I just happened to run into Uncle and came to take a look. I was standing very close to Matthew. If I tilted my head slightly, I could touch his shoulder just a few inches away. I secretly moved to the side to distance myself from him. Noel's gaze fell on me, and the color of his eyes darkened. Perhaps he thought I was getting too close to Matthew and was afraid that I would say something I shouldn't. Uncle really is. You thought it was troublesome when I asked you to accompany me. But why did you come here now? Matthew didn't answer. He walked around the car and asked, Have you chosen it? Oh, I'm still a bit torn. How about you buy them all for me? She looked up at Matthew with her eyes blinking. Lillian was born knowing how to act coquettishly. When she was a child, she used her coquettishness to make adults fulfill all her requests and take all the candies from other children. Her skills were still as good as ever. But unexpectedly, Matthew didn't fall for it. Just one car. As your graduation gift. For anything else, ask your father. She was disappointed and finally chose the car she was test driving. When Matthew went aside to sign the order, she complained to Noel. No wonder my uncle doesn't have a girlfriend. He's always so firm in his decisions. You don't know. I have a senior sister with blonde hair and blue eyes and a great figure who likes him. Foreigners are passionate and bold. She secretly got into his bed at night. But my uncle grabbed her by the back of the neck and threw her out. He was so angry that his face turned red. He blamed me for bringing people home casually and threw me to live in the school dormitory the next day. She shook her head, looking frustrated. But I really couldn't imagine what Matthew's angry expression would be like. I guessed that he probably had 1,000 swear words on his lips but couldn't say them because of his upbringing. And his face was red. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Now Noel looked at me even more strangely. A faint voice came from behind. What are you laughing at? My heart skipped a beat, and I turned my head mechanically. Lillian quickly said, It's nothing. I told a bad joke. And Miranda thought it was funny. Matthew obviously didn't believe it, but he didn't pursue it further. He called Lillian over to sign the papers. Noel leaned close to me and said in a very low voice, Miranda, your feelings for me are a bit too strong. Why did you come here and make yourself sad? I didn't want you to see these things and be upset. Are you misunderstanding something? Isn't it? I thought we had made everything clear. Why did you show up in front of us today? And why did you come here with Matthew? I was really speechless now and said angrily, Is it possible that I'm not here for you but for Matthew? I said it out of frustration without thinking. But Noelle got anxious. What do you mean by that? I know you've liked me for many years. And I gave you 2 years of endless love in return. Do you think I'll believe these angry words you're saying now? Forget it. It would be a waste of breath to continue talking. The 4 of us went back together that day. Noelle was driving, and Lillian was sitting in the passenger seat. Matthew and I were sitting side by side in the back. He looked a bit tired and was lying there casually with his eyes tightly closed. Only then did I dare to secretly look at him. He was very good-looking, with distinct facial features, firm skin, and a superior brow bone and nose bridge. His thick eyelashes trembled, and I was so scared that I quickly looked away. But I met Noelle's eyes in the rearview mirror. His eyebrows were furrowed tightly, and he stared at me with an unreadable expression. I was a bit puzzled. I wasn't even looking at him. Why was he so nervous? Lillian was chatting non-stop beside me and started talking about our school days again. Miranda really helped me a lot back then. If it wasn't for her going to find my uncle, I would have been scolded to death by my mom. In high school, she and I were in the same class. Lillian was very naughty, and her grades were always at the bottom of the class. She was often called to the teacher's office with her parents. The most serious time was when she had a puppy love with a senior from a higher grade. The head teacher caught them, and she said that she had to invite the parents no matter what that day. On one hand, she grabbed the head teacher's hand that was about to call her mother and cried pitifully, promising that she wouldn't do it again. On the other hand, she secretly winked and mouthed at me, who was standing outside the door waiting for her, asking me to go and find her uncle. I ran to her house as fast as I could. When I saw Matthew, I was so out of breath that I couldn't calm down. It was Matthew who poured me a glass of water. It took me a long time to explain the whole situation to him. In the end, he went to the school and brought Lillian back. When they came back, her eyes were all swollen from crying. It seemed that she had been severely scolded. But now Lillian could still mention this embarrassing thing with a smile. It seemed that she didn't care much about it anymore. I envied her very much. I envied that she was loved by so many people. And I especially envied her cheerful and optimistic personality. If it were me, I might never want to mention it for the rest of my life. I smiled and said, "Back then, I always hitched a ride in your family's car. It was only right that I did you a favor." She sighed and said, "We went to school and came back home together. When the family driver came to pick us up, we weren't in a hurry to go back. We'd eat at roadside stalls, buy idle merchandise, and dawdle until 7 or 8 o'clock. Occasionally, when Uncle came to pick us up, we'd sit up straight and not dare to say a word more. Those times were really interesting. But why did you suddenly take a leave of absence from school in your senior year of high school? I didn't get to see you until I went abroad." My smile froze on my face. The damp ground, the dark alleyway. This was the past I least wanted to mention. Noelle also looked at me, as if waiting for my answer. He had never asked, and I had never told. I opened my lips, and my chin trembled involuntarily. I couldn't say a word. My mind went blank, and I couldn't even think of a topic to avoid the question. "Lillian." Matthew opened his eyes and gently kicked the passenger seat. Lillian turned to look at him, puzzled. "Huh? I'm resting. Don't make a noise." "Oh." She turned back awkwardly, and the car fell silent instantly. That night, I received a message from Noelle. "You looked very pale when Lillian asked you in the car today. Are you okay?" I didn't reply. Half an hour later, he sent another message. "Can you tell me what happened back then? I'm a bit worried." I blocked him and buried myself in the soft quilt. Just then, Mike knocked on the door. He came in and placed a cup of warm milk on my bedside. "I heard from Mom and Dad that you're planning to move out after the spring festival." I would be in the second semester of my junior year of college at the beginning of the year. I had found an internship in a place quite far from home, and it wasn't convenient for me to commute back and forth. I nodded. Mike's expression became serious. He hesitated to speak, and finally it turned into a sigh. "Forget it. You're all grown up. I'll take care of the internship company in advance and help you find a house with good security. You have to be careful then." "I know. You're so naggy." He ruffled my hair, called me heartless, but there was deep worry in his eyes. The milk didn't help me fall asleep. I had nightmares all night and wet the pillow with my tears. The spring festival was approaching. On New Year's Eve, I was curled up on the sofa watching the boring spring festival gala. Mike suddenly pulled me up and said he was going to take me to set off fireworks. Fireworks were strictly prohibited in the villa area. But on such a joyous occasion, the management wasn't so strict. Last year, I had watched a magnificent fireworks display. We walked all the way to the artificial lake in the community, and a large group of people were already there. Lillian, how old are you? You're still bossing the brothers around like when you were a kid. Lillian smiled sheepishly, her eyes blinking in the moonlight. Isn't it more fun to set off fireworks with me than watching the spring festival gala? She rubbed her hands, looking a bit cold. Noel smiled and took off his scarf. Just as he was about to put it around her neck, he caught a glimpse of Mike and me out of the corner of his eye, and his hand froze. This scene was so familiar. At this time last year, Noel sent me a message asking me to come to the lake secretly. He tied the scarf around my neck and put on the gloves for me, and accompanied me to watch the carefully prepared fireworks. He said, "Year after year, may it be like this moment." May it be like this moment. The wind stung my face, and I tried to huddle deeper into my sweater collar. I squatted on the ground and watched them frolic and play. Brilliant lights bloomed in the night sky. Lillian took out a camera and handed it to me. "Miranda, men are no good at taking photos. Why don't you take a photo of me and Noel?" She had started to call him more intimately. Noel stood aside, his expression a bit stunned, but he didn't refuse in the end. He gently put his arm around Lillian's shoulder and forced an unnatural smile. I picked up the camera, but Noel didn't look at the lens. It seemed that he was looking at me. It was so strange. With a click, the moment was frozen. Behind them were the fireworks in the sky, and the two people in the photo were smiling. In the past 2 years, Noel hadn't taken a single photo with me, but I had taken a photo of him with someone else with my own hands. In the corner of the photo, Matthew's profile was captured. Only then did I realize that he was also there. But he was standing a bit far away, like an elder watching the children's mischief. He was just a bystander and didn't participate. Lillian was satisfied with the photo. After taking several, she called everyone to take a group photo. Mike wanted to take the camera and asked me to go over and be in the photo. But looking at his arm in a cast, I shook my head and refused. Anyway, I didn't like taking photos very much. I especially didn't want to be in the same frame as Noel. Matthew was pulled to the center. He was standing casually, squinting his eyes at me. Before the shutter was pressed, he suddenly called me. "Miranda, come here." I was holding the camera and was a bit puzzled. The camera was in my hand. If I was going to be in the photo, who would take it? Someone with good sense quickly came forward and took the camera from my hand. "I'll take it. Go over quickly." I consciously stood at the very edge of the crowd and buried my head deeper into my collar. Matthew turned around and called me again. "Come here." I was pushed next to him by others. On the other side stood Lillian, and Noel stood behind us. I could feel his burning gaze, like a thorn in my back. "Get ready for the photo. 3, 2, 1. At the moment the shutter was pressed, Matthew put his arm around my shoulder. He said, "Happy New Year, Miranda." This photo was really ridiculous. When we looked at it many years later, everyone's expressions were quite interesting. I was very close to Matthew, and I opened my mouth in surprise. Matthew, who always had a serious expression, raised the corners of his eyes and smiled like a teenager. And Noel behind us stared intently at the hand on my shoulder, his face a bit twisted. Of course, this was how I remembered his expression. In fact, his face in this photo had already been scratched by Matthew. I suspected that Matthew did it on purpose, because the moment he finished taking the photo, he let go of his hand and looked at Noel's expression. A man as cold and noble as him might be hiding a lot of tricks in his heart. 1,000 possibilities flashed through my mind. In the end, I came to the conclusion that he was testing Noel. Maybe he saw what happened that night, but he didn't hear my conversation with Noel. So now he should be exploring the relationship between Noel and me through his interaction with me, and checking for his little niece. The time at the poker table and the time at the 4S store were all on purpose. At the thought of this, I thought Mike was right. I still had to stay away from him. I really couldn't afford to provoke a man with such unfathomable thoughts. But even if I couldn't afford to provoke him, daily interactions were still inevitable. On the first day of the Lunar New Year, Mom and Dad dragged Mike and me out of bed early to pay a New Year's visit to the Matthew family. Matthew's grandfather was over 70 years old, full of energy, and happily gave me a big red envelope. I quickly declined, but Lillian took my hand and said, "Take it. It's not much." She handed me the developed photo. "Look at the group photo from last night. Your expression is so funny." In the photo, Matthew's smile made me catch my breath. I subconsciously looked at him through the French window. He was on the phone, and his back exuded arrogance and distance, like an unapproachable existence. I even thought I was hallucinating. How could Matthew smile so happily? Matthew's grandfather looked at us kindly. "I said where you were running wild last night. Come on, let Grandpa have a look too." I respectfully handed the photo to him. Matthew's grandfather adjusted his reading glasses. The next second, his smile froze on his face. But soon, he looked at me with a gentle gaze again and said to my parents, "The children have grown up so quickly. There are only 2 girls among the younger generation. Miranda is sensible and considerate, and I like her very much. It's a pity that I only have Lillian, this disobedient girl, by my side." "What you said. Matthew hasn't started a family yet. When he does, you'll still have a grandson to look forward to." Matthew's grandfather waved his hand and said, "Matthew is even more troublesome. He's already 30 years old and hasn't brought a girl home yet. Don't mention it." He changed the subject. "I really like your Miranda. She's the same age as Lillian and they've always been on good terms. How about I adopt her as my god-granddaughter so that our 2 families can have more interactions in the future?" When these words came out, my parents were flattered and quickly agreed. "It's really a blessing for Miranda to have you as her god-grandfather." Getting involved with the Matthew family meant not only closer daily interactions but also unimaginable interests involved. Matthew's grandfather pulled me to him and sent someone to fetch a bracelet. "If you're my god-granddaughter, then this red envelope isn't enough. This is a pair of bracelets left by her grandmother. You and Lillian can each have one. Come to Grandpa's house often in the future." Generally speaking, the practice of adopting a god relative was usually for children. I was already an adult, and I couldn't figure out what Matthew's grandfather was up to. I could only look at my parents for their opinion. They winked at me, telling me to agree quickly. My mind was a bit muddled, but I obediently thanked him and called him Grandpa. Just then, Matthew finished his phone call and came into the room. Matthew's grandfather called to him, "I've adopted Miranda as my god-granddaughter. From now on, when she calls you uncle, it's for real. You have to treat her like your own niece, just like Lillian." Matthew stopped in his tracks, and his eyes were as cold as black jade. When he opened his mouth, his voice lost its calmness. "Father." Matthew's grandfather's face also darkened a lot, and he said coldly, "It's settled. Don't forget your identity. Come and give the nieces red envelopes." But Matthew turned around and went upstairs directly, leaving behind the words, "Sorry, I still have some work to deal with." The atmosphere was very strange. Lillian immediately leaned against Matthew's grandfather and coaxed him until his face brightened up. But my mind was in a mess. Matthew should dislike me a bit. He didn't even want to acknowledge me as his niece. The elders were chatting downstairs. Lillian pulled me upstairs and asked me to help her choose clothes. "I'm going out with Noelle tomorrow. Which set do you think I should wear?" There was a shy expression on her face, and it seemed that things between her and Noelle were going well. Actually, I didn't feel heartbroken anymore, but there was always a thorn in my heart. If they really liked each other and were destined to be together, why did Noelle waste 2 years of my life for no reason? I thought for a long time and asked the question, "Do you like him?" She was taken aback for a moment, and then quickly smiled and said, "He's very good to me, and he's a good match for me." These didn't sound like words from Lillian. Since she was a child, everything she wore and used had to be her favorite, and she never settled for anything less. As a friend who grew up together, even though our relationship wasn't that close, when it came to matters of the heart, I hoped she could think clearly. If you like each other, why didn't you get together before? She fell silent, and her gaze shifted to a group photo on the bedside table. In the photo, there was a heavy snowfall in Manchester, and Lillian was wrapped in a man's arms. The man looked a bit familiar, but I couldn't remember who he was. Her eyes gradually turned red, and her hand gripping the clothes tightened and tightened. I thought our relationship wasn't good enough to talk about such personal issues. Seeing that she was in a low mood, I didn't bother her anymore and made an excuse to leave the room. In the corridor, the door of the study suddenly opened, and a hand pulled me in. I was just about to cry out in surprise when Matthew pressed me against the door. His face was very close to mine, and I could even see his slightly trembling eyelashes. "Uncle, what are you doing?" His breathing was a bit heavy, and it blew gently on my face. "Miranda, I'm only 8 years older than you. You don't have to call me so old." "No, Mike and Noelle are only 3 years younger than him and they call him uncle. Why is it that when I call him uncle, I'm making him sound old?" I looked at him in confusion. His eyes were burning with eagerness, and I instinctively turned my head to avoid his gaze. After a moment, he softly said sorry, released the hand that was pinning me against the wall, and took half a step back. I pushed the door open and ran out as if I were escaping. Matthew was acting a bit strangely. I was so scared that my cheeks were burning hot, and my breathing became rapid. "Lillian, are you in there?" Noelle was holding a cup of tea and had just walked up the stairs. He met my eyes. Seeing that I wasn't feeling well, he quickly walked up and put the back of his hand on my forehead. "Are you running a fever? Your face is so red. I told you to dress warmly in winter. I sent you a message a few days ago asking you to keep warm, but you blocked me." His tone was so concerned that I was in a trance. As if he was still the old Noelle. I came to my senses, waved his hand away, and said, "I'm fine." "You say you're fine. Look at your face. No matter what, I want you to be okay. I didn't expect that without me. You can't even take care of yourself." I felt a bit annoyed and pushed him, saying coldly, "I said I'm fine." Noelle obviously didn't expect me to push him. His hand shook, and the hot tea spilled all over the floor. A lot of it splashed onto my feet. It was so hot that I sucked in a breath of air and immediately squatted down. Noelle was a bit panicked. He wanted to pick me up. But just then, Lillian, who had heard the commotion, came out of the room. His hand that was in midair stopped. "Miranda, are you okay?" Lillian rushed over in a hurry and pushed Noelle. "What are you standing there for? Take her to deal with it quickly." With Lillian's permission, Noelle came to his senses and bent down to pick me up. A pair of hands directly blocked the way. I already remembered Matthew's hands. They were slender and bony. They had pushed all the chips to me, and they had also rested on my shoulder. Matthew used them to pick me up around the waist again and strode towards the nearest room. His arms were very warm, leaning against his chest. I could hear his steady and powerful heartbeat. I saw Noelle staggering after us, ignoring Lillian. Then I was in too much pain to open my eyes. I just felt him put me down and gently take off my socks. When the cold water rushed down, the pain intensified at first, and gradually, the pain lessened a lot. I slowly opened my eyes, and what came into view was Matthew's well-defined jawline. He stared intently at my red and swollen instep. My arm was still wrapped around his neck. The scene was a bit ambiguous. I awkwardly let go of my hand and thanked him. The arm he had placed behind my knee suddenly trembled, and I was so scared that I quickly hugged him again. "Hold on tight. Be careful not to fall." At the door, Noelle's eyes became sharp, as if he wanted to see through this scene. There was a hint of gnashing of teeth in his words. "Uncle is really considerate to his own niece, but isn't it a bit too close?" Matthew didn't look back and said word by word, "I have only one niece. Also, this is my private room. Please leave." Noelle's face turned livid, and finally he turned around and left. Only after confirming repeatedly that I was okay did Matthew lift me down from the washstand. Then he carried me to the edge of the bed and let me sit down. I remembered that he had just said this was his room, so I was sitting on his bed now. Suddenly, I felt restless and tried to stand up with my support, but he pressed my shoulder firmly. "Sit still and don't move around." He placed my foot on his lap, dried the water with a towel, and gently wiped it with a cotton swab dipped in burn ointment. The force was very light, and I could hardly feel the pain. Unlike the usual angle of looking up, this time I was looking down at him, and I could even see the top of his thick hair. Somehow, I gathered the courage to ask him, "Uncle, do you dislike me very much?" He paused in his actions, and without raising his head, he retorted me, "Why do you think so?" I thought for a while and said, "Matthew's grandfather recognized me as his godgranddaughter. But you didn't approve, did you?" He smiled on his own, and his voice was as gentle as jade. "The old man has a really bad heart. I don't recognize it. But that doesn't mean I dislike you. I was so shocked that my jaw almost dropped when Matthew described his own father like this. But since he said he didn't dislike me, I dared to ask further. On the day of Lillian's homecoming banquet, did you see me in the garden? He didn't speak. After applying the medicine and putting my foot down, he slowly said, "Yes, I saw you." Even though I knew the answer, my heart still skipped a beat. Then you know my relationship with Noel. When he heard Noel's name, his face darkened, and his voice became a bit deeper. I know. What about Lillian? He stood up and tapped my forehead with his knuckles. You still have the mind to worry about others. Lillian won't like him. He's just wishful thinking. I nodded. It was only after he went out to call Mike that I realized how ambiguous my actions just now had been. Oh no. Matthew is really strange. Mike's hand was not convenient. So in the end, it was Matthew who carried me downstairs. And then Mike helped me home. When going downstairs, Noel was sitting on the sofa, his eyes closely following me, not afraid at all of being seen. Was he crazy? He was the one who said he wanted to keep it a secret. I gave him a fierce glare. Mike noticed my expression and was a bit puzzled. Why are you looking at him like that? Noel accidentally scalded you. Are you holding a grudge? I said maliciously. Yes, brother. I can't stand seeing him now. Every time I see him, my foot hurts. So don't bring him to our house for a while. Mike nodded thoughtfully. Early the next morning, Noel came to my house on the pretext. Mike blocked him outside the door with one hand and refused. Aren't you going out with Lillian today? Why are you still here? I was sitting on the sofa with my legs crossed, watching anime, and I only heard his voice. I scalded Miranda like that. How can I have the mood to go out? Let me in and take a look. Fortunately, I was prepared and asked Mike to be my mouthpiece. Don't come. My sister can't stand seeing you recently. She might have PTSD. Noel was turned away, and Mike came over and sat beside me. By the way, he seemed to remember something. Uncle asked me to give your number to him, saying that you were injured at Matthew's house, and he has the obligation to pay attention to your subsequent recovery progress. Seeing that I didn't speak, Mike was very considerate. I know you're timid and don't like dealing with people you're not familiar with. How about I help you refuse? No. I suddenly looked up. Push it to him. After saying that, Mike had a complicated expression. I also realized that my tone was not right and quickly made up for it. After all, he's an elder who has recognized the kinship. It would be impolite to refuse. In less than 10 minutes, I received Matthew's friend request. His Instagram was just like him. A pure black profile picture, a blank nickname, and a clean moments. In short, there was nothing. He sent a message. Are you feeling better? I replied. Much better. Thank you, Uncle. It showed. Typing. Several times on the other end. But nothing was sent. My foot healed after a few days of recuperation. And Mike also removed the cast. Mom and Dad joked that the bad luck in our family had finally passed, and both children didn't have to be disabled anymore. As soon as the spring festival was over, I was going to start my internship. It was a design position that matched my major. The treatment was average, but the internship in a leading company in the industry had a high gold content. I had to report to work as soon as the 7th day of the first lunar month came. Mike bought me a small apartment near the company and stuffed a lot of handy self-defense tools into my bag. Call me if you have anything. Be careful in everything. He arranged my solitary living life in an orderly manner. And for the first time, I felt that he was reliable. When did I get close to him? On a rainy night when I was 18. He had red eyes and hugged me, saying sorry over and over again. In fact, I had never blamed him. A few days later, I received a message from Matthew. I heard you moved out for an internship. I replied to him. Yes. It's a bit far from home. It took him a long time to reply. Send me your location. After sending it, he didn't reply anymore. Until the next evening, waiting for you downstairs. I had just finished my design draft after overtime work and quickly ran downstairs to my apartment. A Bentley Continental was parked downstairs. I ran over from the back of the car, and the car window of the driver's seat gradually lowered. The rearview mirror reflected Matthew's face. Uncle, why are you here? I have some business entertainment nearby and came to take a look. Don't people need a driver for business entertainment now? After saying that, both of us fell silent. I turned my head away and asked, "Do you want to come up and have a seat?" "No. Get in the car." I pulled the door of the back seat, but I couldn't open it no matter how hard I tried. "Sit in the front," he said in a deep voice. I had to sit in the passenger seat reluctantly. Matthew took me to a private restaurant. The location was a bit remote, but it had the advantage of a large area and a good environment. There were waterside pavilions, and there was a scene at every step. There was no menu in the restaurant. Matthew asked me what I wanted to eat, and I casually named a few dishes, and they could actually be made. I couldn't help but secretly look at him. He was very gentle when eating. The food on the chopsticks wouldn't fall into the rice bowl, and he wouldn't make the slightest sound. The top light shone on his face, and his eyelashes cast a deep shadow. I thought that God loved the world, and Matthew was the one who was favored. He had everything since birth: the vulgar wealth and status, the inner intelligence and charm, and the external figure and appearance. He was all in the upper position. I couldn't help but wonder, would such a person have troubles? "What are you thinking about?" He looked up and asked me. I was thinking, "Do you have any worries?" He pursed his lips, as if thinking, "Yes." After a moment, he replied, "I don't know how to please girls." His dark eyes locked onto me. Was there some poisonous mushrooms in the food that made me hallucinate? When people are flustered, they will pretend to be very busy. I quickly lowered my head, served myself a bowl of soup, picked up some food, and added some rice. Fortunately, Matthew didn't continue. He asked me about my work environment and living conditions. I answered respectfully, treating him like an elder. Finally, he asked me, "Has Noel looked for you again?" I shook my head. I blocked him on both the phone and Instagram. Even if he wanted to find me, he had no way. What's more, he was very close to Lillian. Yesterday, I saw a photo in her moments of the two of them going to a concert together. After dinner, he drove me home. I was really tired from work recently, and the smell in his car was very nice. I unconsciously fell asleep. After a long time, I vaguely felt a warm current of air hitting my face. I opened my eyes and was very close to Matthew. Our eyes met. He leaned in with his whole body, and his hand was on my waist. I seemed to hear the sound of my own heart beating, just as I was hesitating whether to close my eyes. With a click, the seatbelt buckle popped out. He sat up straight and put his hand on the steering wheel. "I saw that you were sleeping uncomfortably, so I unbuckled your seatbelt for you." His tone was very ordinary, making me look even more like a fool for thinking too much just now. "Thank you, Uncle. I'm leaving now." I got out of the car as if I were running away. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Matthew parked by the side of the road and didn't start the car for a long time. He didn't leave until I reached the downstairs of the unit building. The notification sound of my phone rang. It was a message from him. "Call me if you have anything. Pay attention to your safety." On a night of 7 or 8 degrees, I was so hot that it was like I had just run 800 meters in the summer. I couldn't even catch my breath. Below the message, it was from Mike. "Noel is just going to be near you. I asked him to bring you some things. Did you receive them?" I stopped in my tracks and looked up to see Noel leaning against the corridor. Cigarette butts were scattered all over the ground, as if he had been waiting for a long time. He stared at me steadily. I wanted to take the bag from his hand, but he stood there stiffly and didn't let go. "Why did Matthew send you back? What does it have to do with you? Do you know how long I've been waiting for you? You blocked me on the phone and Instagram. I didn't dare to tell your brother. I've been waiting since 7 o'clock until now. And then I saw you getting out of Matthew's car. Didn't I remind you to stay away from him?" His tone was anxious, and he didn't leave me any room to interrupt. I looked at the time. It was a little past 9 now. It seemed that I had slept in Matthew's car for a long time. After he finished speaking, I said calmly, "Are you so afraid that I'll tell Matthew?" Although I didn't say it, he already knows. Noel's tone paused, and his voice became tense. "He knows. Let's not talk about this for now. Even if you like me and are sad, you can find someone else. But not Matthew. He's not a good person. Are you crazy? I don't like you anymore." He seemed to have heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. His eyes widened in disbelief, and he asked, "You don't like me anymore? Then who do you like?" "Matthew." His tone made me a bit annoyed, and I instinctively retorted, "Yes, I like him. Is that okay?" I had never seen Noel with such an expression. His pupils suddenly dilated. His chest rose and fell with his breath, and his hand holding the bag was so tight that his knuckles turned white. Miranda, stop being naughty. Just pretend I didn't hear what you said today. If I find out that you have any more contact with Matthew, I will tell Mike. I believe he has the same opinion as me. Noel's shamelessness exceeded my imagination. The perpetrator actually had the nerve to threaten the victim. I snatched the bag from his hand. His face was as white as paper. The moment I passed him, he shouted out as if making a final struggle. Matthew almost killed someone. My heart trembled violently. I turned to look at Noel. He stood there with his back hunched. I went straight upstairs, but my hand pressing the elevator button was somehow shaking. I wouldn't ask Noel. He wasn't worthy of my trust anymore. Remembering that Mike had also told me to stay away from Matthew, I called him. Mike on the other end of the phone was a bit hesitant, no matter how I asked. In the end, he still said, "Stay away from him. Forget it." Anyway, it was just to deceive Noel. I didn't really like Matthew that much. After that, I didn't reply to Matthew's occasional messages. I tried my best to avoid him when I went home on weekends. I even politely refused when Lillian invited me to her house for dinner. The next time we met, it was already spring. Despite my many strong refusals, Mom and Dad still held a grand birthday party for me. I couldn't very well be absent. Matthew came very late, wearing a neat and heroic suit. It seemed that he had just come home from the company. Lillian quickly lifted her skirt and ran over. I stood on the spiral staircase and looked down at him again. My mind uncontrollably thought of the scene where he held my foot and applied medicine. Such a person. I couldn't even imagine him with blood on his hands. Could he really kill someone? As if he realized my gaze, he looked up. Just as our eyes were about to meet, Noel suddenly called me from behind. "Miranda, happy birthday." He took out a carefully wrapped gift. I casually thanked him and told the servant to take it down. There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes, as if he was expecting my reaction. "Aren't you going to open it and take a look? You will definitely like this gift. Brother Noel, Lillian is downstairs. You'd better go over there." When he heard my address, a flash of surprise crossed his expression, and the light in his eyes dimmed. I turned my head, and Matthew was already out of sight. "I've thought through a lot of things recently. I was so stupid before." I interrupted him impatiently. "Everyone is watching. Are you sure you want to reminisce about the past with me here?" His face looked ugly, and he finally didn't continue. Somehow, a trace of disappointment welled up in my heart. I seemed to have become strange too. It seemed that I was looking forward to seeing Matthew. Mike settled me aside and said considerately, "I know you can't handle this kind of occasion. Just go and stay somewhere cool. Your brother will take care of it." He exchanged greetings and politeness with the guests, clinked glasses, and it made me feel tired just watching. When I was so bored that I was about to fall asleep, I suddenly heard Mike's voice filled with uncontrollable anger. "How dare you come here?" My drowsiness was instantly scared away. Logically speaking, Mike wouldn't swear in front of others. I stood up. Through Mike's back, I saw the man standing at the door. He leaned to one side, and all his weight was on the crutch in his hand. And that face covered with terrifying scars was a nightmare that I never wanted to see in my life. My memory seemed to return to that wet and cold rainy night. The man's disordered breathing, the disgusting voice, and the touch that climbed up me like a snake. The lights in front of me overlapped with the darkness of the memory, and the pattering sound of the rain that night rang in my ears again. As the world spun, a pair of hands steadied my arm. I instinctively wanted to push him away, but he held my trembling hand tightly. "Don't be afraid. I'll take you to rest." I walked unsteadily and half relied on Matthew as we left. I only heard a frivolous voice behind me. "Miranda, happy birthday. You remember me, right? I've been thinking about you all these years." "Kevin, fuck you." There was chaos behind me, with things crashing to the ground and the noise harsh and ear-piercing. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked away from around me, and I couldn't catch my breath, until Matthew's hand was placed on my back, gently smoothing it from top to bottom. "Take a deep breath. Don't be afraid." But I really couldn't hold on any longer. My eyes went dark, and I lost consciousness. I had a very long dream. In the dream, I was wearing a school uniform and holding a transparent umbrella. It was a late autumn with continuous rain. The ground was full of puddles, and I carefully avoided them, afraid that the mud would stain my white shoes and socks. Lillian skipped the cram school to go on a date with her boyfriend. She informed the driver in advance and asked me to go home by myself. When I came out of the cram school, it was already 8 o'clock. I called Mike, and it was a bit noisy on his end. It seemed that someone was teasing him and another girl. I asked him if he could come and pick me up, and he said, "I have something very important to do. The rain isn't too heavy. You can take a taxi by yourself." What an ordinary day it was. But it just had to be that damn day. Before I could get out of the alley, Kevin blocked my way. He said, "Miranda, I like you." He was a spoiled youngest son. He would cut off the fluffy ears of a rabbit just because he liked them. And he would cut out the vocal cords of a puppy because he hated its barking. I was afraid of him, but I couldn't get away. I said, "What you have isn't love, and I don't like you either." "No, love is about wanting to possess. And not liking is about wanting to destroy. Let me prove it to you." "Okay, prove how much I like you." I was pushed to the ground and covered in sewage. He crushed my umbrella and choked my throat. His disgusting lips pressed against my cheeks and my neck. I thought, I should have walked faster that day, even if the mud and water wet my shoes and socks. The plot and the dream gradually became blurred. I only remembered that someone came to rescue me before the last step. My brother held me tightly and kept saying sorry to me over and over again. After that, I locked myself in a narrow room, pulling the curtains tightly, day and night. At the most serious time, I survived on sedatives and nutritional fluids, until I received a misdelivered package without a signature. I opened it as if facing a great enemy, and it turned out to be just a cluster of lily of the valley. For other flowers, when they lower their heads, it means they are close to withering. But not the lily of the valley. The bell-like flower buds hang on the flower stalks, and it is in full bloom. The card said the flower language, sweetness and a return to happiness. It is said that those who receive lily of the valley will be favored by the god of luck. I thought maybe things would really get better. When I woke up, my parents and Mike were all around my bed. At the door stood Noel. I could only see his shoulders shaking violently. Mike seemed to have not slept all night. With bloodshot eyes. "Sorry, Miranda. I didn't expect him to be released from prison early. It had been less than 4 years, and he was released early. Maybe it had something to do with the current prominence of the Kevin family. They said a lot to me, but I couldn't listen to a single word. In a daze, I remembered Matthew telling me to take a deep breath and not be afraid. His voice made me feel very at ease. When Mike went downstairs to bring me medicine, Noel came in with heavy steps. He kept his head down and didn't dare to get too close. After a while, he looked up, and I saw his red eyes and the stubble on his cheeks. "I didn't know you had gone through such a terrible thing." "I'm sorry, really sorry." I didn't know why he was apologizing to me. This matter had nothing to do with him. But he was so sad that he didn't dare to look at me, saying sorry over and over again, saying that he shouldn't have hurt me. "You must have mustered a lot of courage to trust me. I let you down. Even today, when I walk on the street, the passing of a strange man can make me instantly nervous." When I wanted to make a change, the frustrated Noel appeared by my side. I thought a person as good as him was worth my courage. Even though my palms were full of sweat when we held hands for the first time and I couldn't stop trembling when we hugged for the first time, I still felt that happiness outweighed fear. Listening to his chatter, I felt tired again and turned my back to go to sleep. In a daze, I seemed to hear his suppressed sobs. My family kept this matter a secret for my reputation. I took a half-year leave of absence from school, and they just said I was sick to the outside world. The same was true for the Kevin family. They said that Kevin, who was serving his sentence, had gone to study abroad. I heard that they spent a lot of money to pull strings, and in the end, he was still sentenced to 5 years. The Kevin family used to have business cooperation with us, but later they never had any contact with each other. Kevin being educated like this has a great deal to do with his parents. It's just a little fight between the kids. Is it necessary to make such a big deal out of it? Besides, there wasn't any real harm done, was there? Why ruin the harmony between the two families? It makes me sick. Now the Kevin family is at the height of their power, and our family can no longer compete with them. I heard my brother on the phone outside the door, shouting loudly, "Julia, I'm warning you for the last time. Don't let that bastard brother of yours get close to my sister again. If there's a next time, he'll be missing more than just one leg." Why is his leg lame? And his face? Why is it covered in scars? Mike has never told me. In my family, Kevin's name is a taboo. I wanted to ask Mike, but seeing his trembling hand holding the phone, I didn't say anything. I met Julia in high school. She is Kevin's sister and Mike's classmate. She is a very beautiful sister. Even though her family values sons over daughters, she lives a free and unrestrained life. On the night of the incident, what Mike said on the phone was, "Your brother is confessing his love right now. It's that sister Julia you've met. The rain isn't too heavy. You can take a taxi by yourself." I haven't seen her since then. I think Mike isn't feeling good either at this time. After resting at home for a month, I think I'm much better. There's no need to torture myself in the present with things from the past. I proposed to go back to work. It took a long time to persuade my parents, and they finally agreed. They hired a bodyguard and a driver to pick me up and drop me off at work. I sat in the back seat under their eager gazes. The burly men on both sides squeezed me so much that I didn't have room to wave goodbye. The bodyguard's task was to send me to the door of the apartment and wouldn't leave until he saw me open the door and go in. But as soon as I got in the elevator, I met Noel carrying big and small bags. His eyes dodged a bit, and he turned his head away and pretended not to know me. I was a bit speechless and said, "Why are you here?" He stammered, "It's convenient here. It's close to the company. By the way, I moved upstairs from you. We'll be neighbors from now on. If there's anything wrong, call me immediately. Their family company is in the opposite direction from here." When we reached the floor, I got out of the elevator. He was still shouting behind me, "I put my key under your doormat. If you're scared, come up and find me." I ignored him and took out the key from my bag to open the door. But the door opposite suddenly opened. Matthew, carrying the trash, met my eyes. I was taken aback, and Noel in the elevator was also taken aback. I said why the people opposite wouldn't sell no matter how high the price was. Before he could finish, the elevator door closed. I dismissed the bodyguard and greeted Matthew. "Uncle, why are you coming out from here?" He didn't speak and got closer to me. My breath caught in my throat. I saw him slowly squat down, take out the key from under the doormat, and put it in his pocket. "If there's anything, come to me. I'm very close to you." He was wearing a beige home suit, as if he had just taken a shower, and there was a faint smell of shower gel on him. It smelled kind of nice. I should have asked him what brand he used. For someone like him, I really couldn't imagine what he would look like with blood on his hands. Memories collapsed and were rearranged, and the blurred fragments suddenly overlapped. His hand, holding a broken beer bottle, smashed it on the man's face again and again. He said not to be afraid, but his approaching steps were interrupted by my scream. In a trance, I wanted to ask him, but the next second, his phone rang. The screen showed, "Old man," and he pushed me back into the door. The moment the door closed, I heard him curl his lips and say softly, "Good night." I received a call from Matthew's grandfather the next night. "I heard that Matthew moved near you. My child, just treat him like your own uncle. Grandpa really likes you. Matthew will be engaged in a while, and you must come to the engagement with your family." After hanging up the phone, I felt empty inside. Even a fool could tell the underlying meaning of what Matthew's grandfather said. Recognizing me as his god-granddaughter might be to use ethics and morals to kidnap Matthew. Matthew was right. The old man has a really bad heart. I was a bit annoyed. Seeing the unopened birthday gifts piled up beside me, I violently opened them as if I had found an outlet for my emotions. The cliched fixed deposit Mike gave me was the same every year, with no novelty at all. The gift from Lillian was tickets to the meet and greet of the idol we were crazy about in high school. The gift from Noel was a courtyard designed by an internationally renowned designer. I once told him that I wanted to visit it, and I didn't expect him to really buy it and give it to me according to my preferences this time. Matthew sent a thin envelope, which contained only a photo and the materials of a house. In the photo, in the Finnish manner, there were lily-of-the-valley flowers everywhere. They were fresh, full of vitality, and had not been picked yet. But how did he know? Just then, he sent me a message. "Do you want to have a late-night snack?" I politely refused. "No, thank you, Uncle," he replied. "Don't call me Uncle." Seeing that I didn't reply, he sent a question mark. The prank made me feel much better, but after a while, the doorbell rang. Matthew stood at the door, holding a bowl of dumplings. Aren't you going to invite me in? I crossed my arms and smiled. It's not very convenient, is it? It's late at night. What's Uncle doing visiting his niece's house? His eyebrows furrowed. Did the old man say something to you? Yeah. He said Uncle is going to get engaged and invited me to the wedding. How much should the niece give as a wedding gift? Relying on his affection for me, I became more and more unbridled, calling him uncle and myself his niece one after another. Matthew's face became darker and darker. Why didn't I know I was going to get engaged? He squeezed in beside me and put the bowl on the entrance hall. What are you doing? I seemed to have gone too far, and quickly reached out to push him. He grabbed both of my wrists with one hand and placed them on his chest. As the distance between us got closer, his familiar breath pressed down on me. Call me that again. Uncle. The kiss fell overwhelmingly, with a burning breath and warm lips. At first, it seemed like a release of emotions, and gradually it became gentle. When we separated, the tips of his ears were slightly red, and he stared intently at my lips. The dumplings will get cold. Eat them first. I sat on the carpet holding the bowl of dumplings. My mind was as confused as a mess of porridge. Matthew acted as if nothing had happened and sat on the sofa looking at me. I felt like he was staring a hole in the back of my head. I ate very slowly. While eating, I thought about where to start asking questions later. Was it about that rainy night or the birthday gift? A large bowl of dumplings was finally eaten clean. After eating, I turned my head. He had his hand resting on the back of the sofa and was looking at me with a relaxed expression. It was clearly spring, but I felt a bit too hot to catch my breath. It's so hot. I'll go turn on the air conditioner. Inattentively, my toe kicked the edge of the coffee table, and I let out a cry. Before I could squat down and cover it, he reached out and pulled me onto his lap. Oh no. The pain disappeared immediately. His body was stiff, very warm, and smelled really good. I leaned close to his chest and sniffed like a little dog. Hearing his breathing gradually become rapid, I said in a low voice, what kind of shower gel do you use? A trace of annoyance appeared on Matthew's face. His hand on my lower back pressed hard, and he said through gritted teeth, Did you do it on purpose? I shook my head like a rattle. He held my face in both hands. Just as the atmosphere was getting more and more ambiguous, the doorbell rang inappropriately. Miranda, I heard your voice. What's wrong with you? Matthew wanted to get up, but I pushed him back onto the sofa. He had a somewhat resentful expression. I patted his face and limped to open the door. Noel was knocking so loudly that it made my ears itch. As soon as I opened the door, he grabbed my shoulders and turned me around. Seeing that I was okay, he finally let out a sigh of relief. What happened just now? I just wanted to send him away quickly. Nothing. Go upstairs. He still stared at me with a worried expression. Why is your face so red? And you're not even wearing socks. I was just about to push him out when I saw his gaze gradually move up and become dark and unclear. Matthew swatted his hand away, and his chest pressed against my back. Noel's face darkened terribly, and he just looked at my face in silence. Before I could figure out what to say, he had already turned around and left on his own. He didn't want me to see the corners of his eyes gradually turning red. I stared at his back, opened my mouth, but still didn't say anything. The door was slammed shut by Matthew, blocking my view. He leaned close to my ear. Why are you looking at him? I turned around and pushed Matthew out the door as well. The days passed as usual. I never saw Noel again. I would just occasionally receive strange phone calls. On the other end of the phone, he seemed to be drunk, mumbling words. You've got the wrong number. I'm not Lillian. Actually, I heard it. He was calling my name over and over again. Matthew would occasionally pick me up from work. He didn't seem to be busy at all recently. He could almost bring me late-night snacks every night. And I gained 8 pounds in a month. One day after work, he told me that he had an online video conference tonight and would come over later to watch a movie with me. The bodyguard sent me to the door and watched me go in. I was a bit bored and was looking for a movie to watch later. Should I choose a romantic love movie? Or a thriller and horror movie? How about finding a family movie about an uncle? I bet Matthew's face will be darker than the bottom of a pot. As I was choosing, the lights suddenly went out. It seemed that the circuit breaker had tripped. I was just about to go out to check the circuit breaker in the corridor, but my hand paused on the doorknob. This shouldn't happen in a high-end apartment. I called Matthew. but he didn't answer. He should still be in the meeting. I also sent a message to the bodyguards who lived nearby, asking them to help me check upstairs. It was estimated that it would take about 10 minutes on the way. I wanted to find a lighting tool, but the door suddenly started to shake. I couldn't stop shaking, and my phone slipped from my palm. After ringing a few times, there was no movement outside the door. The room became bright again. I took a deep breath and looked at the situation outside the door through the doorbell camera. But it was pitch black outside, as if someone had deliberately covered the camera. The door started shaking again, and a disgusting voice came. "Miranda, I know you're in here." I desperately covered my mouth and stepped back as if running away. There was a fine sound coming from the door lock. Soon, the door was opened. That disgusting face was revealed. Kevin stared at me with eagle-like eyes. "Thanks to you, I learned a lot of lock-picking skills from those lowlifes in prison." I took a step back and slowly approached the bag on the sofa, which contained the self-defense tools prepared by Mike. But Kevin closed the door behind him and was also approaching me step by step. "Why are you hiding from me? Didn't I say that I like you? You said that wasn't love, but I've been thinking about you for 4 years. It took me a lot of effort to find you after getting out. Why are you afraid of me? Don't you like me too? When Julia introduced you to me, you were the one who took the initiative to reach out your hand to me. Julia had brought him to our house. That was the first time I met him, and I greeted him and shook his hand out of politeness. But I didn't expect that in the eyes of such a pervert as him, this could be proof of showing favor. I tried my best to calm down, but my voice was still trembling. "Let's talk it out. Don't come any closer for now." He seemed to have heard a joke. Leaning on his crutch, he moved slowly step by step. The sound of someone pounding on the door came, and I heard Matthew's out-of-control voice. "Miranda, open the door." I felt extremely regretful. I should have given him a copy of the key earlier, but his voice gave me great comfort. I calmed down and calculated the distance to the door. Kevin had trouble walking. As long as I bypassed him and ran quickly, I could open the door for Matthew. "Hurry up. Run faster." I ran over with all my might. Kevin's expression changed, and he reached out to grab me, only touching the corner of my clothes. When my hand touched the doorknob, tears welled up in my eyes. But the door seemed to be broken. The deadbolt was stuck in the slot, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't open it. Kevin's face was ferocious. He turned around, and the crutch made a harsh sound as it slowly rubbed against the smooth floor. I desperately pulled the doorknob and shouted with a sobbing voice, "I can't open it. Matthew, I can't open it." Matthew's hand that was pounding on the door stopped. He had a heavy nasal sound, and his voice sounded like forced calmness. "Don't be afraid. I'm right here. Try again. If it doesn't work, hide to the side. I'll kick the door open." Kevin was getting closer to me. I took a deep breath and twisted the anti-lock back and forth a few times. With a click, the door opened. Kevin leaned forward and grabbed my collar, pulling me over. A cold dagger was pressed against my neck, and I heard his disgusting voice. "Oh, you're here. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Matthew raised his hand, trying to control his emotions. "Don't do anything stupid. Put the knife down first." Kevin's expression was distorted and eerie. "See my leg? It's all because of you. Matthew, what do you think I should do to get revenge on you?" He threw the crutch over. "What did you use to hit me that day? A golf club. This is almost the same. Come on, cripple your own legs. I know exactly what it sounds like when you use force. Use some strength, or this knife will be stabbed into her throat." I shook my head desperately at Matthew. He stared fixedly at the dagger across my neck, picked up the crutch as if accepting his fate, and said, "I was the one who hit you that day. It has nothing to do with her. Take it all out on me." 1 blow, 2 blows. Heavy and dull sounds of hitting came. Matthew's forehead was covered in sweat. With each blow, his body would tremble violently. But even so, when he was so exhausted that he knelt down, he still didn't stop. "Stop. Matthew. Don't hit anymore." He raised his head to look at me with all his strength, but his eyes gradually became unfocused. Kevin laughed sinisterly in my ear and slapped my face with the cold dagger. "Don't be in a hurry. After I cripple his legs and disfigure your face, that's when it'll be fair." He took me to the sofa. His ferocious face was very close to mine, covered with terrifying scars like centipedes. The dagger ran across my cheek, and he said to himself, Where should I start? First the skin, then the nose, and finally the eyes. I closed my eyes in pain, taking advantage of his inattention. I secretly took out a portable knife in the shape of a lipstick from the bag behind me. I stabbed down suddenly. Kevin reacted quickly and caught the knife with his hand, but the pain still made him let go. The dagger fell, and I stumbled towards the door. Matthew couldn't speak anymore. I held his face and called him. He only weakly lifted his eyelids. When he saw it was me, he closed his eyes slowly as if he was at ease. I wanted to drag him out of the door, but he was too heavy, and I couldn't use the strength in my legs. He didn't move at all. Kevin picked up the dagger. I held a small knife less than 10 centimeters long against him. With no chance of winning, he slowly approached as if he didn't care about his life. I'm already like this. It would be great to drag you both to death with me. When the distance was less than 2 meters, he roared and pounced on me like a madman. I instinctively bent over to protect Matthew, but the pain I expected didn't come. I opened my eyes, and Noel was standing in front of me. He let out a muffled groan and grabbed Kevin with both hands. Blood dripped drop by drop, and the flow rate became faster and faster as it dripped onto the floor. He pushed Kevin back while enduring the pain until Kevin leaned backward and his back of the head hit the round glass table beside him. The glass shattered all over the floor, and he didn't move anymore. Noel looked back at me. There was a large bloodstain on his chest. Seeing that I was okay, he let out a heavy sigh and couldn't hold on anymore. Kneeling down on the ground, he slowly fell down. It seemed that he was saying something to me, but I couldn't hear him clearly. I kept slapping Matthew's face and crying out to him. Wake up. Matthew. Wake up. His face was as pale as paper. His eyebrows twitched involuntarily. He still couldn't open his eyes, but he mumbled his lips to comfort me. It's okay. It's okay. I hugged him tightly and wiped all my tears on his face. Noel's perspective. When Lillian was 17, I knew I liked her. I wanted to wait until she went to college to confess my love. But I waited and waited, and she said she was going abroad with her uncle. I wasn't willing to give up. How could I be willing to let this unrequited love end without even having the chance to confess? Mike looked at me like I was a fool. You kept calling her name when you were drunk. Like a broken record. I said you don't understand. If I don't even express my feelings, it will be a regret for my whole life. He looked a bit dejected. But actually, it doesn't make any difference even if you do. 3 months after she went to the UK, I finally managed to take time off from work and flew there. There was a heavy snowfall in Manchester. I stood downstairs waiting for her. The snow piled up on my shoulders, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of cold. She appeared, stepping on the snow step by step, looking adorable. I had just stepped forward when a boy called out to her. The boy was thin and only wearing a thin and cheap coat in the severe winter. Lillian rushed into his arms and cried bitterly. I watched them hug and asked a passerby to take a photo. They were really enviable. On the second floor with the lights on, Matthew held a wine glass and looked down on everything. I hated him the most in that manner. He was only 3 years older than me, yet he was pretending to be so mature. I flew back to the country that night. Actually, I wasn't that heartbroken, just feeling empty inside. I still didn't confess my love in the end. As I had predicted, it really became a regret. I worked day and night and didn't think about Lillian much. I just worked continuously until I was exhausted and had a car accident due to carelessness. My family ordered me to rest well. Suddenly, I had nothing to do and just stared blankly day by day. Mike saw that I was in a bad mood and often invited me to his house. Although he had a sharp tongue, he was really a nice person. It was during this time that I noticed Miranda. When she was a child, her presence was very low, standing next to Lillian. You might not even notice her. She always tried to sneak into her brother's room and then secretly look at me. Her face was redder than the watermelon she was holding. I thought it was a bit funny and treated her like a younger sister. Once she asked me for advice on a higher mathematics problem. While I was explaining it, she actually fell asleep. The wind blew the exercise book, and when it turned to the last page, there were her delicate and beautiful words. Secret love is a grand pantomime. I thought Miranda and I were in the same boat. She opened her eyes and met my gaze, and her face turned red again. On a whim, I asked her, Miranda, shall we give it a try? Miranda was very nice. So nice that I often felt guilty. So I tried my best to treat her well. Looking at her happy face, I would occasionally feel happy too. It's just that I never took a photo with her. The scene when the flash went off on that winter night in Manchester made me feel a bit sad whenever I thought of it. She never made a fuss with me either. She was well behaved and sensible. They said that when a current girlfriend asks about an ex-girlfriend, she often gets angry while asking. I thought it was a bit funny. Miranda never mentioned Lillian in front of me. I thought that on our second anniversary, since our relationship was stable, it was time to make our relationship public. But fate just loves to play tricks on people. Mike said that Lillian was coming back to the country and was still single. I couldn't listen to the rest. They kept asking me about Miranda. Subconsciously, I said that I pitied her and was just playing around. Actually, I had never thought about this question, but the answer just came out like that. Miranda heard it. Her eyes were as red as a rabbit's, and I didn't dare to look at her. I knew I was sorry for her, but if the regret could be undone, I still didn't want to miss the chance. Noel, too. Things were going smoothly with Lillian. It seemed that she didn't like me that much either, and I didn't seem to care that much either. But there were always unexpected things. Miranda and Matthew were getting very close. She would even blush because of him, just like she used to for me. There was a restlessness in my chest, and I couldn't really describe what it felt like. I should be worried about her. Matthew wasn't someone to be trifled with. That guy from the Kevin family didn't know how he offended Matthew and was almost beaten to death and sent away. And he was also ordered by Matthew's family to go abroad to avoid the limelight. The way he looked at her couldn't be hidden from a man. He was in love, deeply in love. The more such a man was like this, the more dangerous he was. I tried to persuade Miranda to stay away from him several times, but she ignored me. In that group photo that night, my expression was distorted. But I still kept it for many years because it was the only photo of us together, even though it was another man hugging her in the photo, and I was just a bystander. I was a bit annoyed and smoked one cigarette after another. When I accompanied Lillian to a concert, all I could think about was the scene of Matthew holding her. I asked Lillian, "Do you have someone you like?" "Yes, but he was too poor. He ran away as soon as my grandfather gave him $5 million. There were tears in her eyes. She sniffed and said, "But he was satisfied with you. We might as well give it a try. What do you think?" The string in my heart that had been tightened suddenly snapped. I remembered that 2 years ago, I had asked Miranda the same question. Her eyes were wet at that time, but she would never look at me like that again. The next day, I went to find her on the pretext, but I saw her getting out of Matthew's car with a blushing face. She also said that she didn't like me anymore and that she liked Matthew. What should I have said? In the end, what came out was slander against Matthew. But she didn't even ask for an explanation. It was as if she felt disgusted just looking at me. On her birthday, she refused to open the gift I had carefully prepared and her gaze stayed on Matthew. I was so jealous that I was almost going crazy. Why did Matthew deserve her? But soon I knew that he had the right. Mike told me that something very bad had happened to Miranda. The person who saved her at that time was Matthew. I had been with her for so long. Yet I had never once asked her what had happened during that half year. I even heard her again and again and turned a blind eye to her tears. I moved upstairs from her place and met Matthew again. He was one step ahead of me and bought the house opposite. Later, when I saw Miranda open the door with slightly red lips, and Matthew stood in front of me, encircling her as if declaring his sovereignty, I couldn't say anything. I turned around, but I couldn't move my feet. Matthew also came out. He stood beside me and said coldly, "I gave you a chance." I didn't quite understand. When there was a strange noise downstairs, I was taking a shower. I just rinsed off the foam on my body, and I was one step behind Matthew again. But fortunately, I blocked the knife for Miranda. I watched her cry her heart out while holding Matthew. It was as if it wasn't my shoulder that was stabbed, but my heart. I called her, "Miranda, can you please look at me?" She held Matthew's face and didn't give me another look. In a trance, the image of her chubby face when she was a child appeared in my mind. She stood behind the crowd, with her head down and not speaking. When I went to the restroom and was hurrying back to dig soil for Lillian, Matthew called out to me, "What's your name again?" "Forget it. Dig one for that little girl over there too." It turned out that Matthew had noticed her before me. FL's perspective. Kevin was dead. The Kevin family made a fuss for a long time, but in the end, it was suppressed by the Matthew family. Noel was sent to Japan for treatment. I took him out of the blacklist. But I never received any news from him again. Matthew took almost half a year to recover from his injuries, and gradually he was able to get out of bed and walk. I made an excuse to look for Lillian and went to Matthew's house every day. Matthew's grandfather didn't pretend anymore and blew his beard and stared at me. Matthew, using the excuse that he couldn't use the strength in his legs, openly put his arm around me and asked him, "Do you still recognize your god-granddaughter?" Matthew's grandfather banged his crutch so loudly that he stuttered, You, for a long time. In the end, Lillian stuffed a mouthful of grapes into his mouth. "Grandpa, you'd better talk less. Otherwise, my uncle will really stay single for the rest of his life." Then he really shut up. Mike also came to visit Matthew occasionally. Now he was bolder and called Matthew by his name directly. But his attitude was still respectful. Sometimes he would bring a project proposal to consult Matthew. After getting the comment, "A money-losing thing," he would slink away. Mike tentatively told me, "Actually, the person who saved you that day, I know. It was Matthew." He scratched his head and said, "When I rushed over after receiving his call, Kevin was already lying on the side in a terrible state. You were so scared that no one could touch you. You only dared to raise your head when you heard my voice." Later, this matter was kept a very strict secret. Matthew's family didn't want the news to leak out. And he also said not to mention this matter in front of you again. "So I never told you." As he spoke, his eyes turned red again. I patted him on the back and said it didn't matter. Then I turned around and gave Matthew a fierce glare. He spread his hands and pretended to be innocent. As soon as Mike left, I held his face and asked fiercely, "When on earth did you start liking me?" He pretended to think. After thinking for a long time, he said, "I don't remember." I pinched his ear and half mocked, "Is your memory declining because you're getting old?" "Uncle." When Matthew heard this address, he was like Pavlov's dog. His face darkened and he was about to lose his temper. I quickly coaxed him, "I won't call you that anymore. Don't be angry." He gritted his teeth and said in a suppressed voice, "It's not that you can't call me that. Tonight in the bed." I quickly covered his mouth. On the day I fully recovered, he took my hand and walked to the garden. Waving the small shovel in his hand, he said gently, "Do you still remember your wish bottle?" I didn't remember. He panted as he dug the soil. Although his legs had recovered completely, I was still a bit worried standing beside him. The old soil was turned over, and a small, yellowed glass bottle came into view. Matthew picked it up, wiped it clean with a handkerchief, and handed it to me. "Take a look." I took it with anticipation. He was still gesturing with his hand beside me. "I remember you were only this tall at that time. You always stood at the back, didn't talk much, and I thought you were a pretty mute." On the rolled-up piece of paper, it was written crookedly, "I hope to be seen." Tears rolled out of my eyes one by one. I wiped and wiped, but it seemed that I couldn't dry them. Matthew was a bit worried and quickly asked me what was wrong. I threw myself into his arms and choked. It turns out that I've always been seen. The end. Matthew's perspective. I have a high seniority. Adults who are 20 or 30 years older than me call me brother. And the boy in my family who is 3 years younger than me calls me uncle. The scene is a bit funny. Since I can remember, there have been non-stop language, finance, and equestrian courses. Even my manners during meals and sleep are strictly regulated. I was deprived of all the rights to children's entertainment. The fireplace in the study was warm, and tutors came one after another. I stood in front of the French window and watched them playing in the snow. The old man said that since I was born with everything, I naturally had to make some sacrifices, so I had always been a bystander to them. The little girl in my family was the same, standing in the corner. She could play for a whole day and no one would turn around and say a word to her. So I became her bystander again. I observed her fingers clutching the hem of her clothes and her somewhat aggrieved but forbearing expression. When picking up Lillian at the school gate, among the large crowd of students in school uniforms, I could always find her. Watching her grow up gradually, at the age of 17, she became very pretty and greeted me politely. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't lie to her. I really didn't know when I started liking her. It was a slow, gradual process. That night, it was drizzling. I went home, but Lillian wasn't there. The driver said that it was Lillian's classmate's birthday and she wouldn't go to the cram school that day. What about her? I didn't know if she had an umbrella. I sat for a long time and suddenly remembered that I needed to go out and buy a pack of cigarettes. The broken umbrella in the alley. The sobbing cries. I got out of the car and picked up the golf club from the back seat. In a trance, Mike's voice brought me back to my senses, until I heard her crying. I wanted to get closer, but she was trembling with fear. Finally, I called Mike. The old man had just started using a crutch and put all his strength on my back. How did I teach you usually? Restrain yourself and return to the rights. You used to do so well. Do you want to ruin all my efforts? You could just save her out of kindness. Did you weigh the pros and cons before beating the person like that? Is it necessary to make an enemy? I said. I couldn't hold back. You couldn't hold back. That's my family's business. What does it have to do with you? Do you still not know your mistake? I looked up and stared straight at him. Do it again, and I still won't be able to hold back. The old man's hand trembled, and the crutch fell to the ground. An old fox who had been through ups and downs for decades saw through my thoughts at a glance. He cursed. You brute. You're a brute. How old are you? She's only 18. I was ordered to go abroad and take over the overseas business. Before going abroad, I often sat downstairs in her house, staring at the tightly closed curtains of the room. I sent her a bunch of lily of the valley, hoping that she would become lucky. Later, I was very busy. I heard that she was gradually getting better. In my social media alternate account, I could catch a glimpse of her happiness. It was that boy whom she had been peeking at since she was a child. I had seen him downstairs before. It was good. She looked very happy. But Lillian received one gift after another, tailored to her preferences, and she didn't even have the lily of the valley that she liked. It seemed that he didn't care about her preferences. I thought it was time to return to the country. Before returning to the country, I used Lillian's phone to call Noel. It's me, Matthew. Lillian is about to return to the country. I don't know if you have time to give her a welcome party. By the way, she likes Lily of the Valley. The old man was right. I'm not a good person.